Roman generals weren't clever because they were born smarter. They were clever because Rome trained them to think like architects, while standing inside a storm. A Roman general didn't just win battles. He managed hunger. He managed fear. He managed time. Picture a cold morning at the edge of a forest. The air tastes like iron. The men can't see the enemy, but they can feel them. And the general doesn't shout. He walks. He watches footprints. He studies wind. He listens to silence like it's a report. One centurion asks, "Do we march now?" The general answers, "Not yet. First, we build." That's the first secret. Romans didn't treat protection as something you hope for. They treated it as something you construct. Every night, even on hostile land, they built a fortified camp. A ditch. A wall. A gate. A plan. Not because they were afraid. Because they refused to be surprised. And Roman cleverness wasn't just steel and discipline. It was decisions. A Roman general always asked the same quiet question: what will I need tomorrow, before tomorrow arrives? So they carried shovels as seriously as swords. They carried engineers, surveyors, map makers, men whose job was to make the world obey measurements. And when the enemy moved fast, Rome moved smarter. They didn't chase emotions. They chased advantage. Sometimes, the cleverest move was not to fight at all. A young officer once whispered, "We could crush them today." The general looked at the hills and said, "And lose 10,000 men doing it." He pointed at the valley and added, "We win by staying alive. We win by choosing where the battle happens." That's the second secret. Roman generals didn't gamble with pride. They controlled the map. They controlled the road. They controlled the hours. They understood a brutal truth: the army that eats wins. The army that sleeps wins. The army that arrives first wins. And that is where Roman genius becomes almost invisible. Because it's not the dramatic moment of charging forward. It's the calm moment of preparation. It's a bridge built before the river becomes a trap. It's a road carved before winter closes the mountains. It's a supply wagon guarded like a treasure chest. Roman generals weren't chasing glory. They were chasing certainty. They also understood people. A battle is not just metal and muscle. It's confidence. So Roman generals attacked the mind before they attacked the body. They made their army look endless. They marched in perfect rhythm. They raised dust clouds on purpose. They lit more campfires than they needed. Sometimes they let the enemy see them building. Not because it was slow, but because it was terrifying. A scout returns and says, "They're digging again." The general nods. Good. Let them watch. Because the message was simple: we are not tired. We are not rushing. We are not panicking. Roman generals also used information like a weapon. They sent scouts ahead. They questioned prisoners. They paid locals. They watched trading routes. They learned which tribes hated each other. And when the enemy expected a straightforward fight, Rome arrived sideways. A general might say, "They think we will cross at sunrise." Then he smiles and adds, "So we cross at night. Upstream. Quietly." This is why Roman generals seemed clever. They didn't seek fair fights. They sought controllable fights. If the enemy had cavalry, Rome chose narrow terrain. If the enemy had numbers, Rome chose discipline. If the enemy had speed, Rome chose walls. Even their formations were thinking machines. The legion wasn't a single body. It was a system of smaller bodies. If one part broke, the rest held. If one unit moved, another covered. Adaptability was built into the structure. And here's the part that most people miss. Roman generals weren't lonely geniuses. They were managers of talent. They trusted centurions to enforce discipline. They trusted engineers to solve landscapes. They trusted scouts to find shadows. A clever general didn't do everything himself. He designed the machine, then let the machine work. And when Rome lost, they didn't just mourn. They studied. They copied what hurt them. They improved it. They returned stronger. A Roman general could lose a battle and still win the war, because he understood the longest strategy of all: patience. Sometimes Rome defeated enemies simply by refusing to collapse. The greatest Roman victories often looked boring on the surface. Roads, forts, schedules, supplies. But boring is what wins against chaos. A general stands over a map with a candle. He traces a line with his finger and says, "We don't need to be brave tomorrow." He pauses. "We need to be ready." That is Roman cleverness in one sentence. And it's still a lesson now. Because most people lose not from lack of talent, but from lack of structure. The Romans built structure into everything: their marches, their camps, their chain of command, their timing. Even in panic, they had a method. Even in fear, they had a plan. Roman generals also understood something painfully human: most enemies break before they die. They break when they feel surrounded. They break when they feel outnumbered. They break when they realize they are too late. So Rome made people feel late. They arrived before the enemy expected. They fortified before the enemy could react. They struck supply lines instead of pride. They made victory feel inevitable. And the world remembers the sword. But the sword was only the last step. The real weapon was preparation. So if you ever wonder why Roman generals look so clever, it's because they were never only fighting the enemy in front of them. They were fighting weather, distance, hunger, ego, fatigue, and time itself. They didn't wait for perfect moments. They manufactured them. They didn't trust luck. They built leverage. And that is why their victories still feel sharp after 2,000 years. Not because Rome was always stronger, but because Roman generals were trained to think like builders, in a world that wanted them to think like gamblers.